What is up, everybody? Let's start the session in probably another minute's time. Let me just make sure that everything looks fine. Hi Sumat, how's it going? That's not a problem. Yeah, so the slight change in the plans with the classes, and I've rescheduled it, so you'll be seeing few more frequent classes from this week. Next week also will be there, so that's not an issue. You can still catch up from where we left off, because I'm going to be giving a brief into what we have seen in the last two sessions, and we'll be taking it from there. Alright, so everything looks set up, and I'm already lagging behind by 2 minutes, so I'll just get this thing started. So for today's session, I'm planning on covering the concept of classes in Dart, and what exactly do these things do, and how do you use Dart and with classes, creating classes. If you are following me from the Flutter videos, you for sure know that Dart is the classes are pretty much the most important things. With basically, because everything that every widget that you create is actually a class. So if you get a good understanding of this, you will be finding it much more easy to see of Flutter. So let me share my screen. All right, my face is here. So yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be understanding about classes in Dart. I'll give a quick brief on what we did yesterday, for those who might have missed it, because yesterday's session is important as well. So in yesterday's session, we looked into primarily functions, right? Functions, start, shorthand, and functions. And after that, we also looked into something called as operators. Now, what exactly are operators, and how do you use them, and all of those things. We also did understand a little bit more in depth about different operators that are available. When you have arithmetic operator, which is just your addition, subtraction, and things like that. And there is something called as an assignment operator, which is new in Dart, right? And this is actually the double question mark equal to, like, what does this thing mean? Because you will find that throughout Dart, there's a lot of question mark being thrown everywhere. And question mark is a very important operator, especially in Dart, because question mark necessarily means null. No, it just means not null. So if you have a null value present, it just negates that and says, or handles null value. It handles null on variables much better that way. So you just have to look into the question marks. You'll find it much more frequently in almost everywhere that you go to. If you take a huge Dart program, you'll find a bunch of question marks everywhere. So this is primarily because you also understood what is null safety. Null safety as in what is it, what does it do, and how it is important for Dart. Because if you take probably the I would say one of the important things that you see in Java is this exception called as null pointer exception, right? Null pointer exceptions are very famous, and also sometimes it gives nightmares to developers. You often find these null pointer exceptions primarily because you have an unattended variable that is having a value of null or nothing. Now, if you have a value of nothing, you cannot do anything on it. You cannot do toString to this. You cannot do any operator to it, like that. It keeps throwing the null pointer exception. So in order to remove this kind of an exception being present as far as the Dart itself is concerned, they came up with the concept of null safety, where any program that you write, right, by default the compiler checks if it is null or not. And one of the better ways to do it is using the question mark symbol, right? This is how the entire thing is structured. And post this, we also did a little bit of understanding with respect to, quickly see into operators, and yeah, we did the basics of control flow statements, because control flow statements like if, else, and else if, like what do these things do, and how do these things pretty much fare with the rest of the entire application, right? You write a big program and the flow is always from top to bottom. You have a program starting from here, you just say print something, and the bottom you finish it. And what happens in the middle can be controlled using the if else if keywords. There's additionally another concept called as looping statements, and looping statements are not necessarily for and while, where you just loop an action one after another. And that's the bunch of things that we saw in yesterday's session, and that's pretty much it. So if you guys have any questions, you can drop me right now, because the next slide I'm going to be talking about the concept of classes in Dart and how it is very useful, and we're going to just be carrying on from there. So drop any questions that you have and we will go forward. Alright, so I guess I'm going to get moving on. You can still drop your questions and I'll be able to answer them. So moving on, we have the first concept of classes in Dart. What exactly do classes do, right? You often find a bunch of things that is like, you often talk about classes, and without classes there is no object-oriented programming language at all. What does object-oriented programming language mean? That everything that you write, it's called as OOPS concepts, where the first thing that you learn is the classes. And what these classes are basically is like a structural mechanism for bringing in multiple properties. Now let's say that you have a huge house here. This huge house has a bunch of different compartments inside. Like there is one bedroom here, there is one kitchen here, there's a restroom, and there's a huge hall, and things like that are present. And what these necessarily do is that you can either compartmentalize them in such a way that you are going to give it some properties. Let's say that I have a bedroom class present, and what are the things that are going to be present in a bedroom? You have a bed present, and probably you have like a night lamp or something like that present, and these are the characteristics of a bedroom, right? So what you necessarily do is you create a class that is going to match the characteristic of what you want to do with it. Let's say that you are creating a class of students, and if you create a class of students, you will often find that the class will have like a student number as a variable, and you will also have like a age as a variable, and also there is going to be a collection of functions also present along with that class. So you have a function to subtract or find the age of a student. There could be another function to find, probably you will have a function to determine if a student is below some age or above some age, and these are also actions that are going to be clubbed together with the properties. So you call these variables as properties, and these functions called as methods. And if you put all of these things together, you're bringing all of them under one hood, and this is called as a class. And a class have a bunch of properties, and these are very important, because throughout the Dart programming language, everything that you take, starting from say you want to create a simple string is a class, an integer is a class, everything is a class. So everything without it being a class cannot be created, cannot be used somewhere else. So that's basically the concept behind OOPS programming language. It stands for object oriented programming, because everything that you create or pass around, if you take huge program, it's going to be in the form of objects, right? And objects are necessarily the instance of a class, or meaning that just to create an instance of that specific class with some properties attached to it. So I'll just give a brief understanding for what exactly do objects mean here. So let's take a simple class like this. Alright, so you have a class that is going to be for understanding student registration. This is going to be the class, and the student registration is going to be requiring from you an age, a name, and probably it will also might require your marks. And now this also has some functions associated with it, like say an action to determine if the age is greater than 20. Let's say that, so age is greater than 20, greater than age more than 20. So this is going to be the first method. Followed by that, you have another method to determine if the mark is more than say 75. So marks more than 75. So these are the two important functions or instances, basically actions that are associated, and these are just properties. At a given instance of time, these will have some data only, and on the other hand, these things will do some actions. So this is a class that you've created, and you want to now create a bunch of different instances of it. Now, when I say instances, let's say that for the first instance, I want to give the age as 23, my name as Bharat, and another one is going to be the marks. I'm just giving my marks as 80. So this is going to be my first instance. And the second instance, you want to have the same properties, and you just want to give some other values to it. So this time I'll give the value as 24, and I'll just give who's present on the stream now. Sumit is present, so Sumit, and I'll just say the mark is going to be 95, something like this. And finally, let's say there is another instance that you want to create. I'll say the age is going to be 22. I'll say coder monk or something like that, and the age mark is going to be 75. So this way you are creating multiple instances of a class. When you say instances, these are just an instance of a time where it is going to have different values associated with it. The class is going to be the same. You have the same class, same properties, but if you see the values associated with it, it's going to be different. Right? These are called as instances of a class, and these instances are necessarily the objects. So object of a class is going to be marking what is the, at that point of time, what is the value that is associated with the properties that are predetermined by you. You are setting these properties, and you are setting these functions, and a user, let's say that you have created your class and you've given it to 100 different people, and these 100 different people are just creating an instance of an entire school system, and they can create multiple objects with it, and these multiple objects will have specific instance of each individual student, and that's how you create your entire class structure. So this is going to be the class, and this is going to be the instance, and necessarily these instances are going to translate into something called as an object. So the object is going to be the final output of a class. So you can create a class, and without using that class, that's going to be pretty much no use, right? Why are you creating a class if you're not going to use it? The best way to use a class is to create an object for it. So we're going to be seeing like the first structurally how a class is going to be called, or how a class is going to be created. So I'm just going to be using probably my, let me close all these things up. So I'm going to be using my first thing, which is going to be the .pad.dev. Just let me know if you guys cannot see it clearly. So I'll just quickly take a probably try to zoom it in or something like that. So just go to .pad.dev, because like I've been seeing the last 2 sessions, you don't necessarily need a local setup for this to work. So you can just use your the online setup, which is the .pad.dev, and it will pretty much work fine. So what I'm going to do is just now go and start creating variables. You just have variable as first variable is going to be something like this. I'll just say great. So you can see, cool. Okay, the first variable is going to be, let's say, some data. This is nothing, I'm just creating some random stuff. So just creating some probably creating few things, and you can get started with classes. So some data, just type something like this here. So the first data is created. The next one I have is probably I want to create some integer. So I'll just say street number, something like this, right? The street number should be integer, so I'm just going to be giving 233, and probably that's pretty much it. So these are the 2 things that I want. And if you just run this, you will know that it will not run, primarily because it does not have a main function, and we discussed about this main function also in the previous class. So why exactly is the main function required and all of that. So if you guys have any doubts about it, just drop a comment. I'll try to explain it briefly. So the main function is very, very important. Without the main function, there is no entry point into a program. So you definitely need to define a main function. So whatever you print inside this main function is going to get executed one by one, so top to bottom, right? Hello G Srihari. Hello G Srihari, how's it going? So like I said, the main function, you're going to get started. So just do my first print statement here. I'll say this is the start of the program. Great, finish it. And the next thing I have is this is the end of the program. Great, and we'll just run it now. And if you see to the right, hi Dev Kamal, thanks for joining. And yeah, I'm going to talk about inheritance in this session, so you'll see the difference between inheritance and interface. So anyway, this is going to be the start of the function. So I have a main function here, and it just prints the first line as start of the program and the end of the program. Great. Now what you are going to do now is to start understanding about classes. Now in the classes, you should have already seen the video from yesterday and day before yesterday as to what a function is and what a variable is. So I'm not going to be explaining about all of that. So just get started with directly the syntax of a class. Now the class is going to be, when you want to create a class, you make use of the keyword called as class. As soon as you type a class, you'll say that it's turning into green. And I'm just going to now name a class. Now naming of the class should be strictly following the style guide, which we saw in the first session, if you guys remember. Yeah, I'll answer all those questions, Dev. Give me a minute. So the class, you have the keyword class, you follow by the class name, and it should be following the upper camel case, which is kind of like the important one. So I'll just create a class with upper camel case. I'll call it as probably student registration. This is going to be my class name. And you open your flower brackets and close your flower brackets, and you're pretty much done. You've created an empty class now. This class has nothing inside it. It is probably nothing inside basically. So you have you need to now give it some properties, and you also need to give it some actions. So if you guys are going to need a callback, this is what we're going to be trying to do. You're going to be giving it some properties. In this example, you're trying to give the age, name, and marks, and some actions in the form of functions. So just go back here, and we'll start giving it some properties. The first property I'm going to give is going to be the string of name. So just say the name of student. So just give it a name, because within the student registration, I for sure know that it is going to be in the form of it's going to be denoting the student only. So if you see here, whatever you have done so far here, if you just create something like this here, var name, and finish it, and it is not going to throw any error here. But if you're trying to do the same thing inside a class, it's going to throw an error saying that the non-nullable instance field name cannot be given, so it must be initialized. So you can either initialize the name to a null, or you can give it some default value. So if you want to just initialize it to a null, just put it as a question mark before it. So this is what I talked about in the class right here. So I talked about what a question mark is, why question mark is important here, which means that it's just telling that this is going to be a null. If there is no value coming inside for this class, if nobody is actually going to give some name to the name of this variable, nobody is going to set a value for this variable, then initialize it to null. That's what you're technically saying with this question mark symbol. So that's very important one. So if you can do this, that's okay, or you can still do something like name is equal to null. This is also accepted. So okay, it says that can't be a type of string, so you can just leave it like this. So this is going to be like an empty value. Technically there's a difference between an empty value and a null value, which is coming from the memory of it. Like if you have a null value, there is no memory allocated, but even an empty value, there's still some memory allocated for that variable, but no values is present for that memory. That's the difference between a null and empty value. So just go back to the primary one that we did with the question mark before it. So if you do this, it means that if there is no value coming in, just set it to null. So we already have created the name. The next thing we're going to create is the int marks, right? So just marks, you cannot give an empty mark, so you just have to give it a some value. So I'll mark it as null for now. Int, the next one is going to be age. This is also should be in this format. So for this purpose, I'll make it as a double, so it means that it's going to be a floating point value. So we've successfully created 3 properties of this class: the name, marks, and age. Pretty much cool about it. The next thing we're going to do is to initialize the class, initialize the functions. The functions that we're going to do is begin with a void, which is going to be the return type, and now we're going to be giving it the function name. So the function names for this one is going to be check age group. This is going to be the function that I'm creating. I'll create an empty function for now. Nothing is going to be happening inside it, and I have another function created, for example check marks. This is going to be the function that I'm going to try to create. So void check marks, that's it. So function is also created successfully. Great job. So we have 2 functions created. One is the check age group, the next is the check marks. Both of them are done successfully. You have created a function, created a class. So this is going to be the entire thing that you want to create. This from the start to end, you have created a class. and that's what is required for us to do here. So all of this is created. There is no values being sent into this class. You have a name, marks, and age, and there are two functions present inside it, and these two functions are basically for doing nothing right now. Let's do some actions inside this function, right? They've created a function, but no actions is present. So I'll just now do something like this here. So I'll say if this dot name. So when I say this dot means is that it is actually marking this value here. So if you say this dot name, it's marking the variable that is present inside the class. So if you want to have a variable outside the class, you can directly say something like this. You can say data, and it will be trying to pick it up from here. But if you want to denote a value or variable inside the class, you say that this dot age or mark or name is equal to should be age group, right? So I'll just check the age groups here. So this dot age is greater than 22, then you print something like this student is eligible for admission. So something like this, and we'll try to print it right now. So you successfully done. What you've done is you just said, so it says that if you see here, it just this operator can't be unconditionally invoked because the receiver can be null. So that means that you need to check if the receiver is null or not. Just check if the receiver is null. If the receiver is null, then you probably have to check if the receiver is equal to null, not equal to null. Then you check this dot age is greater than 23. So what I've done here is basically check, first of all, if the age is not null. So what I've done is, the first thing I've done is to check if the age is not null. That is the first important step that you need to do. And post that, you're just now checking if the age is greater than 23. Still throwing that error, bloody greater than 23. So let's remove this confusion. We'll set the value as 20.0. This is okay now. So what basically keeps on throwing is that you need to first check if the value of age is null. If it is null, you shouldn't even allow it. That's the null safety feature that the Dart is providing. So if you guys want to see it in action, this is the action. Anyway, so we have created a function just to check the age group, and once the age group is checked, you're just printing the statement. So you have successfully created three properties: name, marks, and age, and you've created two actions for this class. One is check age group and one is check marks, and we are pretty much done with this class. So you have created the class and nothing is actually happening. You're not using it anywhere. So where exactly what exactly is the use case of this? And that's when the next concept comes into picture, which is the objects. So we need to create objects. Basically, objects are nothing but, like I said, instance of a class. You need to create an instance, right? You need to pass some values to it. If you don't pass some value to it, what will you know? You will not know anything. So in order to pass some value inside a class, you need to come up with something called as the constructor. So without constructors, you will have no mechanism of passing values inside a class. You see here till now, this is actually having no way of accepting any data. If you want to say student registration, I can create an object of this, but I have no ways to pass some data inside this class. So what I'm going to do is to introduce the concept called as constructors. So constructors, as the name suggests, construct an object. They are useful for constructing an object, and in order to construct some objects, you need to be able to pass some data to it. In order that it gives the mechanism for it to pass some data inside the class. So constructors are very, very simple. They just take the same name as the class. They just take the same name as the class, and post that you will be able to pass the data inside it. So I'll just show you guys a simple example of what a constructor does, or how a constructor looks like. So we have a class name called a student registration here, right? So you go here and you will just be creating a function with the same name as the class name. So student registration, and successfully we have created a constructor. The compiler knows that if there is a method with the same name as the class name, then it is a constructor. So go here. So to do the first thing, construct add a constructor as the first method in the class. So it's very easy. So another important thing is that constructors do not return any value. You need to make sure of that. So just say student registration, and you open brackets, close brackets, and open close flower brackets, and there you go, you have your first constructor successfully created. So now you can then accept some data inside it. So the first thing I'm going to accept inside it is you can now pass arguments just like how you do it in a function, and you can do anything that you want to do. So basically inside this I'm just going to accept few things. First thing I want to accept is the string of name. So I'll just say string name, and I'll accept the age, marks, and the double H. So what I'm going to do now is once I have the value from the outside, right, somebody has passed the value inside to the class. Now I'll be able to set the value for the class itself. So I'll just say this dot name is equal to name, this dot marks is equal to marks, and this dot age is equal to age. Now this might look a little bit confusing. You might think like, why am I passing the same thing before and after equal to? Now what we need to make sure of is that, like I said, when you say this dot, it means that specific class's variable. So this dot name represents this variable here, and this name comes from the function name. So let's say you want to change it a bit. You say name from outside. So this is the variable now, and you just copy and paste this variable here. So if somebody is passing a name as Bharat, Koran Monk, Sumit, there are a few other people here, Dev Kamal, something like that, this will be carried along in this variable. And after you carry that variable inside the function, you're setting the class variable, which is this variable, and this variable will now be acting as the instance of that class. So basically that's what you're trying to do. So if you have any questions still here, you can just drop a comment. I do see a few questions from Dev. I'll try to answer them post this class topic. All right, so we have successfully created a constructor. This is how a constructor is going to be useful for us, and pretty much we are done. We have constructed a full class with a property. We also have two actions defined, which is a function, and then we have a constructor defined. This constructor is basically for accepting data and setting it to the class. So we have done this. We should now be able to create an instance of the class. So how do you create an instance of the class? Just go here and you need to now create a variable. So just say var student1. This is going to be the first student name that you want to create. You just say student registration. What's the name? This word correct? Student registration, and you will just open it just like a function, and it just pass some value inside it. If you see here, you will just say the 3 positional arguments accepted, but 0 is given. So the first positional argument is going to be the name. So I'll just give it as a name. Name is going to be Bharat. Followed by that, I'm going to expect marks, which is going to be an integer value. So I'll just give it as 80. And followed by that, the age is required. So I'll just give it as 24.0. So successfully I've given 3 values. The 3 values that is going to be passing to the class here, and I also created an object for it. So once the object is successfully created, we can then now do a bunch of things here. So just print. We will now say student1 dot. We can then access all the method inside. You can see here very clearly. It says that you have an access to the function called as check age group. Then you have an access to a function called as check marks. So I'll just try to call the check age group method, and I'll just do this. And inside this check age group, it says that it's expecting a void, so you cannot print it. So I'll just remove it. Remove this as well. So any questions so far? Hopefully I'm not going too fast. So if you successfully done is create an object of the class. This is how you create an object of a class. This is going to be the instance of the class, and that is assigned to a variable called as student1. And with this student1 variable, we are going to be calling the age group, which is going to be the method that is present right here. So when you call this method, this is going to get executed, and that is when executed, you just check if the age is greater than 23. Since you have passed the age right here, it will just check if the age is greater than 23, and it should print something. So we'll also have the else block also. We'll just say else print the age student is past 24, right? So it should work fine. Student is not eligible. So let's see admission, so the semicolon, and this is supposed to be the entirety of a class. You have created a class, you have given it some variables, you have given it some methods, and successfully you have also created an object of the class. So we'll just run this code example now, and just go here and click on the run method, and you see that it's actually automatically doing the work for you. So you don't have to pass any value inside it, you don't have to pass anything inside it. Since you have created a class, the class has a property at that instance of the name is Bharat, the marks is 80, and the age is 24. It is able to check by itself if the class variable is accepted or not. So that's what is getting printed right here. So this is going to be the entirety of a class, and this is how you also create an object of a class. So that's pretty much it. You have covered the concept of classes. The next thing we're going to look into is the concept of inheritance. So it's a very simple concept, because inheritance in Dart is something like, it's a very simple concept, because there's only one type of inheritance accepted, unlike Java. So just see about that, and before that we can take any questions so far. Already, even before you go for that, I'll try to answer any questions. I do see that Dave has one question with respect to mixin and a model class. So I can answer the model class. Model classes are not available in Dart at the moment. This is actually a concept that is actually derived from Python. If you see in Python, right, Python is actually a kind of has a slower compiler in terms of the programming languages, but comparatively faster than a lot of programming languages. So what model classes do is basically like a simple class. Again, it has the same construction, it has the same properties, it has the same functions, everything looks pretty much similar to a class. But instead of just acting as just to create objects, they're also involved in making sure that whatever object is getting created is actually adhering to specific set of standards. So this is just act as a model for giving out some specific instructions for the variable that is going to come in. So if you say I'm going to pass a variable as Bharat and my age is going to be 24, and only if I invoke a method to check if the age group is within the given range, that is going to be accepted. But the model classes are going to be strictly adhering to that by itself, and it's actually not a very new concept. It's been there with Python for such a long time, but it is not required for Dart, primarily because of the inbuilt compiler doing it for inbuilt compiler itself is doing it much more faster compared to the Python's compiler. So they didn't want it in Dart, so they didn't use it, and that's pretty much going to be the explanation for a model class. Let's see another question or two, and I'll continue with the inheritance. So in inheritance, I can cover the topic of inheritance interface and what is a mixin. Right, mixins are a special type of classes. I'll talk about that as well, probably in another 2 minutes time. Any questions so far, guys, or you can move? I just, maybe somebody's coming in, we can have it. Oh, questions. Why is it happening? What's happening? Yeah, question. Got any questions? Drop them right now and I'll be able to answer them. Let's again moving on for the next topic, which is the topic of inheritance. I'll just cover it briefly, And inheritance is actually an important topic under OOPS again. OOPS is again, like I said, object-oriented programming structure. You can consider it as object-oriented programming uh, standards, whatever you want to call it. So object-oriented programming is one of the important concept is the concept of inheritance. If you come from a Java background, you will have pretty much a lot of type of inheritance, multiple inheritance, single level inheritance, and you will have even tree level inheritance. Then you will have bunch of different type of inheritance. But in the concept, when Dart came into picture, right, they try to simplify everything. Even Java, Python does it to a very good extent, because in Python also there is only one type of inheritance available, which is the single inheritance. And they took the advantage that Python gave, because when Python came into picture and they reduced the complexity of this inheritance and classes and things like that, the programming language became very easy to create and very easy to code. So the Dart also has the only single inheritance. So the concept of inheritance is very simple. Just take an example of human, and this human is basically, let's say he has a child, and biologically you will see that there are few things that are derived from the father, and this father on the other hand would have derived few things probably from his father, which is going to be the grandfather, and grandfather, father, and child. So this is going to be the concept of inheritance, right? That's how this is happening biologically. And that's the same thing that is getting used in programming languages also, and Dart is doing just a single inheritance. So which means that you have a class created. This is going to be class A, and you have another class here. This is going to be class B. We do know that the classes can have variables, it can have methods, and put together that's the use of a class. And what the concept of inheritance does is that instead of trying to take out everything from here and copy pasting it here, I'm just saying just inherit all the properties from this class to this class, and that's pretty much it. You're just saying inherit the class A to class B, and you are going to be passing out all the parameters and the functions to this. And inside the class B, you can have your own parameters, you can have your bunch of own parameters on your own. Additionally to that, you can also have functions created on your own. So you can be, you have basically two things now available. One is the concept, or one is the variables and functions from the previous class, which is the class A in this example, and variables and properties from class B also available. So this is going to be the concept of inheritance, and this only one level of inheritance is accepted. You cannot say I'm inheriting from bunch of other people as well, like from other classes as well. That's not accepted. Only one class can be inherited at a given time, and that's the concept of inheritance. So basically just taking all the traits of one class and trying to inherit or take that trait into another class. And in order to inherit something, you make use of the keyword called as extends, and I'll show you guys an example as to what this inheritance does and how you can inherit a class and what other things that are possible when inheritance is done properly. So go back to your Dart pad. That's right here. Let me check for a minute. Just take a quick 1 second break. All right, I'm back. So like I said, we're going to be talking about the concept of inheritance right now. So inheritance, like I said, is going to be pretty much useful when you're trying to borrow some properties, borrow some data from another location or another class. So we already have a class here which is called a student registration, and it has a bunch of properties inside it. It has the property of the name, marks, and age. Now I want to create another class, and this time this class is going to be for let's say student registration. I want to create a student record, right? Student record can additionally have information like parents name, parents age, parents occupation, and things like that also. So I'll just create a class called a student record, And this time I don't want to create everything from the same, like I don't want to copy paste this and put it right inside this. Instead, what I'm going to say is just extend this class, which is the student registration class, and that's pretty much it. So you have successfully done the very first level of inheritance. So you're just saying the student record is going to be basically taking all the concepts or all the information on the student registration. So as soon as you finish inheritance, it says that the superclass student registration doesn't have a zero argument constructor. So what does a zero argument constructor mean? It means that this is going to be the constructor that you created, right? I talked about it in detail as well, where it says that in order to successfully inherit something, you should also abide by the constructor rules. The constructor rules in the example is going to be the student registration. So if you don't have a student registration class present, and this will just accept it right there. So just try it out. Just go here, remove this. We don't basically have a constructor, right? And if you see here, if there is no constructor available for the base class, you can easily inherit it. If you have a constructor for the base class, you should also give the properties back to that class. So we will see about it in another session, but for now just assume that your base class does not have any constructor present. You just have these information and this information along with these two functions being present. So you successfully inherited this student registration into the student record, and you will see how the properties plays out. So what I'm going to do is additionally give here string parent name or father name. I'll just probably mark it as null. And another property, let's call it as mother's name, which can also be mother name. That is also accepted, right? I have student as father's name and mother's name, and additionally on top of that I'll also have access to all these properties as well. So in order to test this out, just create another constructor for this class again. So just create a constructor like student record of, and I just say take a value as string father name, string mother name. So that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to now set the value. How do you set the value? Make use of this keyword. This dot father name is equal to the father name, and you have this dot mother name is equal to mother name. So this is going to be the basic of construction. So it's constructed a simple class object now. So we'll have another important. Let's say we want to have a function. Let's say have the function. Is it not there? Mother's name, mother's name. So just say print parent information. This is also going to be another method that's going to be present. So I'll just go inside, I just print this dot father name, and I'll print this dot mother name. Alright, so two things I've printed. This is an additional function. Now if you see the main class, you go here and it says that I cannot pass the object and things. Actually remove this because you've removed the constructor. So you'll remove this entirely. Now I'm just going to create an object only for this class, which is extending or inheriting some information from another class. So what I'm going to do now is to just create an object for it. So I'll just say student record 1. This is going to be my variable name, and inside the student record 1 I'm going to be creating the object as student record of, and I need to pass two informations to it, which is going to be the father name and the mother name. So I'll just pass father name as ABC, and this is going to be XYZ. So two values are passed and the object is successfully created. So to just give you guys an example, okay, that's true. Just add as father's name to remove confusion. Yeah, cool now. No, cool. Now this is going to be solved. Thanks for the suggestion, Sumit. Yeah. So what is successfully done is to create an object for the student record class, and we try to now access the value or the variables that are available within this class now. So you just try to print. I can say student record 1 dot. You see, I have access to additional parameters also. These additional parameters includes the age, marks, and name, and these age, marks, and names are coming from this class. So that's kind of like a bummer, right? Like, how did it come? How did it come? Because it's coming because you're inheriting the class. You're taking all the properties from your base class and you're bringing it to the child class, which is in this example the student record class. So successfully you have done what you've done is you have done student record 1 dot, you will try to now print, let's say you want to print the mother's name, so just say mother's name, and you just print student record 1 dot father's name. Two things are printed. Now I'm additionally going to try and print the value of the age, so just to see if the default value is setting. So I'll just print the default value as student record 1 dot age, right? And we will see how this thing is turning out to be. Just go up and run this code, and if you see here, to our surprise, I should say that it is also able to pull data from the base class as well. So in this example we have seen about inheritance, and when I say the base class is going to be something that you've created first, and whenever you say the inherited class, this is going to be the inherited class. So this is going to be inherited class, and this is going to be the child class. So the base class is going to be having the base information, and the child class is going to have all the information from the base class, and on top of that have additional information as well. So this is going to be the basic understanding of inheritance, and that's what we have seen today. Yeah, that's going to be pretty much it. That's going to be the concept behind classes and inheritance. I do have one more method or one more function called as overriding members. So let's just cover it in a minute's time. We will open for any questions. All right, so we'll get moving on for the final concept, which is the concept of overriding members. And overriding members, you can think of it as like, let's say that in one class you have one specific function or the method. This method is doing some basic information, just doing some basic activity, and in order to do this activity, you are like not very interested to bring that inside this at all. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the super keyword when you're talking about constructors. Okay, I'll talk about that as well in this session itself. So just go over the concept of override now. So what you're going to do is just overriding is to say there's a function in base class. So this is going to be the base class, and this is going to be the parent class. Sorry, this is going to be the base class, and it's going to be child class. So the parent will always have few informations present, and the child will always be like having additional information on top of that as well. That's the basic understanding. This function, the base class, you have a function called function1, and it is doing some basic action. It's probably printing some data only. But in your child class, you don't want to just have this function. You want to have the same function name, but you want it to do some other print statements or some other action. In order to do that kind of work, you use the add override tag. So when you say add override, you are basically telling that the function should technically get overridden. Whatever function that was present in the base class should get overridden by the function in the child class. So we'll quickly see how that pans out in this example right now. So what I have done is we have a function called as check age group right. What I'm going to do is I'm not very, or we'll just take the example of check marks here. I'm just going to print something like this here. Print, this is a base class function that just checks the marks. Now I'm not very interested or very happy with this print statement. What I'm going to do now is to just, instead of having this method, I'm just going to override this method and create my own new print statement. So how you can do that, just go here and just type, or make sure to create the same function again. What's the function name? Just check marks, and you need to make sure that the return type is also same. All of these things are matching. So just say void check marks, open close brackets, open close brackets, and if you leave here, just say print, this is the child class method, child class, and I am printing something new. right? So basically what you're doing is you're overriding the function, and tell the compiler that there's actually going to be an override. You just mark it with the help of the at override. So when you say add override before on top of the function, it just means that it's going to get overridden by itself, or just you're telling the compiler that this is how I'm going to override it. So this is going to be the functions basics, or this is going to be the override basics. So we'll just see how that pans out, right? We'll just come here and you'll try to print student record 1 dot check marks, open and close brackets, and you will just leave it at that. Check marks. Oh, it says that it has a void, so you cannot print it. I just did the same mistake again. Alright, so it is just saying that now what you're expecting it to print is not this statement, rather this statement. So it's technically should have overridden. So just go up and run this again. Yeah, now you see that this is the child class and I'm printing something new. So that means that it has overridden the function above, and it's basically trying to print a new information or trying to do some new action. So just see what happens when you remove the override symbol. Just remove the override symbol. There is no errors popping up anywhere, and just run this again. So that's also doing the same thing again. So just basically you are just overriding the method. With the add override, you just tell that to the compiler that this is going to be the override that's going to happen. Without the add override, also whatever function that you're creating here, if it matches the same name as the base class function, it will automatically override it for you. Just taking the method name and describing our custom method, so it's called a method override. Yeah, true, that's true. That's good understanding. Yeah, you're doing a method overriding right here. You can do a bunch of other things like operator overriding. You can even do a class overriding, constructor overriding. No, constructor overriding is not possible because constructors do not get inherited in Dart. So you have a method overriding and operator overriding that's possible. I'll cover operator overriding and stuff and all in some other session, in an advanced session, because it's kind of a complex topic to understand how operator overriding work. So far you have seen is create a class, a base class, and give it some properties, and the properties also have some functions, and also we've created something called a constructor here. And in the base class, in the inherited or the child class, we are inheriting some things from the base class and giving it new properties like father's name, mother's name, and also giving it new functions like print parent information and another function name like check marks and things like that, which is getting overridden. And successfully have understood the topics of classes and inheritance. And one more important thing that I want to cover is the keyword called as new. Sometimes you will find this new keyword also being present, and this new keyword is not anymore required in Dart. But if you find this new keyword, do not get worried. This new keyword is necessarily just to say that an object is getting created. So even without this new keyword, you can just do it this way itself, and it will still create an object. That's not going to be something that you need to worry about. So that's pretty much it. So you can now understand the entirety of the concepts of classes and inheritance. And one more concept is the use of super keyword, which Sumit has asked here. I wanted to do this constructor supers in a separate session, because one important reason is there is a bunch of topics around it that is available with Dart. But just to clear his doubt, what exactly is a super keyword? The super keyword is when you want to basically do is you just want to pass some data back up to your parent. Now, you are taking everything from your parent, but what if you want to pass some data back to your parent, right? In order to do that, that's when your super keyword comes into picture. So you have a parent base class here, and you have a child class here, and this communication is happening using the extends keyword. And let's say you have a constructor in this class, and this constructor is taking 3 arguments, and there's another new constructor in this class that's taking 2 arguments. And if there's a constructor in this class, you need to definitely invoke this constructor. Without invoking this constructor, there cannot be an extends that can happen. So in the possibility of doing or sending some data back from the base class to the child class to the base class is possible using the super keyword. So there's actually a compiler technique that I wanted to cover as part of like a special class itself when it comes to super keywords, which I'll try to do in a separate session. but for now this pretty much is going to be the concept behind super keyword. So you just say create a new constructor, give it the first 2 parameters, and you just say super off, and you just pass the 3 parameters. So this is actually the bare bones of it, but you will obviously understand in depth about how the super works in the compiler itself, like how the compiler is able to understand the super and how the compiler is able to understand the new keyword. These are few things that I wanted to really cover. So that's pretty much it, and I do see there's one more question from Dev Kamal. Dev Kamal asks, what's the difference between inheritance and interface? Even though we aren't seeing interfaces in this class, I'll just again give a brief understanding of what an interface is. Now, inheritance, when you do, right, you are actually creating or taking information from one class to another class, right? There could be properties present, and you're just taking the properties along with the values that are actually going to be present as well to this class. On the other hand, interfaces, as the name suggests, are just going to be acting as a simple mechanism or a template for another class to be created. So let's say you're creating a class, and this class is going to be following some specific template. You want to create a paint class. This paint class should have basic templates like draw, or you should have basic things like color, shapes, and things like that. But if what you're trying to do is to keep the same template in another version also. Let's say you are creating a version 1, and the paint app for that version is having information like shape, color, and also probably ruler, whatever is present right here, right? Whatever is present right here is actually present in the version 1. In the version 2, you are trying to add a few other things as well. Other things like, say you want to add like probably gradient, some gradient information, things like that should also be added to the new class or new version. What you will necessarily do is just update the template alone, and as soon as you update the template, whatever classes is actually interfacing that, right, whatever class is interfacing that will probably also get updated to this new template. So interfaces are basically just like acting as a templates, and that's pretty much what is going to be the concepts behind interfaces and inheritance. So that's pretty much what I really wanted to cover. Next session is going to be on Saturday, as far as the planning goes, for answering Sumit's question. So I'll be doing the stream again from 7:30 to 9 on Saturday. So you can check me out. We'll be covering few more additional topics on Saturday and Sunday as well. Check me out on those 2 sessions. Alright guys, I'm just open for 1 minute of questions, and I'm probably going to be ending the stream because I'm hard pressed for time. I'll definitely cover a few more additional topics on Saturday, so you guys can find it pretty much. You can ask me any questions that you want on Saturday. I'll do an extra session on Saturday. Alright, so that's pretty much it for me. Hopefully you guys did learn something new. If you guys want to a quick recap, that's basically what we did. We just understood about classes, and we just understood about inheritance. Right, these are the 2 topics that we tried to cover in this session, and I just touched it briefly only. The main reason I'm saying briefly is because I'm trying to add few additional things also associated with it in the next session. So I'll just try to cover that as well in the next session. Alright, so that's it from me guys. Hopefully you guys did learn something new. If you want to check me out on my YouTube channel, which is Coder Monk, and you can have, I already have a bunch of playlists around Dart as well. You can check them out if you're interested. Using VS Code is cool. Why I'm not using VS Code is because I'm just trying to reach out to a larger audience where they don't need necessarily to have a local setup done. You can just have an online, you can have a web, you can have like a browser, and you can definitely go in and start writing this code and practicing it. So that's pretty much why I'm trying to do it online. So anyway, you just check me out on my channel, which is at codermonk YouTube channel. And if you guys want to check me out on the Unacademy platform as well, you can check me out there. I have a bunch of parallel classes running there as well. So that's pretty much it from me. Thanks again for joining, everybody. I'll see you guys in the next class. Have a great day.